This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Eikev. This week's Parsha we have the mitzvah of Birchas Hamazon. V'achalta, v'savata, v'veirachta. And we've discussed already what is the mechayev of Birchas Hamazon. Is it the achila or the svia? We discussed this morning about Noshim of Birchas Hamazon. Now we're going to speak a little bit about the mystical aspects of Birchas Hamazon. The Sefer HaChinuch, uncharacteristically, which Sefer HaChinuch is usually devoted to giving the ta'amim, the reasons for mitzvahs, he gives us a little bit of a skula here that he heard from his Rabbeim. He says, Kach mekubal ani meraboisai. I have the following tradition from my Rabbeim. Yishmereim Kael. Let God watch over them. This is my tradition from my Rabbeim. Shekol hazahir b'berchas hamazon. Anyone who is careful in benching, anyone who is careful to bench properly with kavana, mizaynoisav mitsuyin loy b'chavod kol yamav. He will have ample sustenance in a respectful, dignified way his whole life. That a segula for parnasa b'chavod, segula for a respectable livelihood is to bench b'kavana. And the question is, what does one got to do with the other? Why is being careful in Birchas Hamazon a skula for parnasa b'kavod? Where exactly does this come from? Well, we don't know who exactly the Rabbeim of the Rebbe of the Sefer HaChinuch is, but we do know that this idea, this concept is rooted in Kabbalah. The Arizal, in the Sefer Shar HaMitzvos by Rabbi Chaim Vital, in this week's Parsha, he says the following. Gam tzarich sheteda, you should know, ki afal pi shenizbar le'el, even though we explained earlier, shabatoich hasuda, that during the meal, imhu b'choil, during the weekday, yisatsev el libay. During a weekday meal, you should have a certain sorrow in your heart, ala churban, on the churban Beis HaMikdash, kanizkar le'el b'shem hazayar, like we mentioned earlier in the name of the Zayar, Amnam beverchas hamazon. But during benching, adarabba. Even though during the meal you need to be sad, but when you bench, you need to be happy. Tzarich laharoi simcha yisera believa. Most people, they're happy when they eat, and they're not so happy when they bench. In fact, I know people that forego eating things just so, no, I'm not going to eat that, I don't want to have to bench. Right? So they could have bread. No, I'll just have a coffee. So basically they starve themselves, right? They deprive themselves of things that the Rebbe Shalom wants to give to them. They should bench. No, you should bench every day. 3 times a day you should bench. What's wrong with bread? Just the opposite. The fact that the media is against carbs, it means it's good for you. Obviously. Whatever they say, just ignore what they say, right? But too much is not good. But no, the Arizal says just the opposite. That during the meal you should be sad, and during Birchas Hamazon you should be happy. Why? Birchas Hamazon adar tzarich laharei simcha yisera b'libay. K'mashikazav b'Zayar Truma, like the Zayar says in Parshas Truma, al bayaz. It says about bayaz vayochal, vayesht, he ate and drank, vayitev elibay, and he was happy. What was he happy about? Not that he ate, that he was benching. The Baruch Hamazon b'simcha b'tevleibav. Okay, now what does this mean? And says the Arizal a few lines down. He says, one should bench with a good eye, and with great happiness. Laharois lefaneha, to show kinedivim, like a generous person, ba'ayin taiva. V'loy kitzarei ayin. So when you bench, you want to bench happily, generously. And if you bench generously, oz gamhi noisenes lanu mizoinesenu b'simcha. Hashem will give us our sustenance b'simcha. If you bench, if you say Birchas Hamazon b'simcha, Hashem will give you parnasa b'simcha. It's midah keneged midah.
But he was an ancestor of David.
Who was an ancestor of David?
Boaz.
Yeah, he was. Okay. Says the Zayar, and by the way, the Shechina. The Zohar HaKadosh is actually in Parshas Vayakel. He also says this idea: Man de mevarich lekut shabricha migoy sava. If you bench after being satisfied, boy lechavna livei yishav kavana u'shava ru'usei b'chedva, and put your love and your joy, and you should not be have sorrow. Ela debarach b'chedva berazada. You should bench with great happiness. He says. If you bench happily with a good eye, the Rebbeinu Shalom will give you happily with a good eye. Okay.
What does it mean to bench with a good eye? With a good heart, we understand, but what is the meaning of good eye?
What does it mean to bench with a good eye? I'm not sure. But this is the idea that we see in the Zohar, that if you bench b'simcha, the Rebbeinu Shalom also gives hachiyav and lei b'chedva ve'ena tava. It's reciprocated. If you bench b'simcha v'tuv leivav ve'ena tava, the Rebbeinu Shalom gives you back.
Are you allowed to bench?
But
if you're not b'simcha,
no, it's not ma'akev. It's not ma'akev l'halacha. There's not a halachic junction. But this is advisable, that similar to what the Sefer HaChinuch says, that if you are careful in benching, the Rebbeinu Shalom will provide you with parnasa b'derech kavod. If you bench b'simcha, the Rebbeinu Shalom will give you parnasa b'simcha. But why is the benching linked to the giving of the food? Why specifically through benching does that become the medium through which Rebbeinu Shalom provides us with food? So we want to try to study this a little bit further. Question number 1, it's number 4, the Shvilei Pinchas brings down this question, Parshas Eikev. What is the explanation in this tradition that anyone who's careful in Berachas Hamazon, he will be provided with bekavod his whole life? And number 2, what's the union of the 3 brachos of Berachas Hamazon? It says, V'achalta b'sabat v'irachta. So why 3 brachos? What's the union of the 3 brachos? Okay. Could you answer it?
Before you go further,
yeah.
Why is it different than the other mitzvah? Famous song, mitzvah the very years b'simcha. Every mitzvah you have to do b'simcha.
Right.
Why is it different?
Right. Okay. Good. Why specifically Berachas Hamazon? There's a Gemara in Kedushin. Gemara in Kedushin says, look at a cow. You ever see a cow coming into shul by Chazar Sashatz collecting? Achnosas kala, he has to marry off his kid. You know, he's out of job, he doesn't have enough grass. No, they have whatever they need. You ever see an animal, a bird, you ever see a pigeon come knock on the door? You know, times are tough. You mind throwing me some... Nah, animals, they seem to make it. Pretty much. You know, they have the parnasa thing down. And interestingly, the animal was created to serve us. So why is it that the animals have the parnasa and we're the ones without the parnasa? Why is it that man is lacking in the parnasa and the animals who were created to serve us, they're not lacking in the parnasa? The Gemara in Kedushin says, Rav Shimon Elazar Omer, Ra'isa miyamecha, have you ever seen chaya va'oif sheyesh lam omes? They don't even have jobs. You ever see a cow who's a doctor? You ever see an attorney who's a lion? Or they don't. You ever see? You ever see a plumber? You ever see a plumber? If you think that's funny, you gotta improve your sophistication, your sense of humor. Come on. If you ever see, animals don't have professions. You call the plumber, all of a sudden a cat comes in. They don't have jobs, and yet they have all the parnasa they need. And it's the people with the jobs, they can't make ends meet. Says the Gemara, says the Shimon Elazar, they are misparnas, not in sar. They are only created to serve me. And I was created to serve my Creator. Certainly, we should be sustained without a tsar. In other words, if animals have it easy and they're created to serve me, why is it so hard for us? The answer is, it's our own fault. It's because of my actions. We don't act properly. You sin, it affects the livelihood. That's all. Really, if a cow has enough to eat, really an Adam should for sure have enough to eat. The problem is, the cow's a good guy, but the Adam is not always a good guy. What exactly is the meaning of this?
Clothing. Your clothing is something that costs a lot of money, but cows don't wear it, you know.
Yeah.
You couldn't even have those dogs.
Yeah. Actually, nowadays the dogs wear the clothing and the Adam doesn't. So I don't know about that, you know? So
the animals have to pay tuition.
Says the Hafla, the Rabbi the Chassam Sefer, he's masber this whole inyan of achila, and he really completely transforms our understanding of eating in general. We know the Rebbe Shem told Adam and Chava they cannot eat from the Eitz Hadas, that we're all familiar with. But he did also tell them, Mikol Eitz Hagan Ochel Toichel. You should eat from the other fruits. And according to many Mefarshim, it's a mitzvah. The same way it was an Aveira to eat from the Eitz Hadas, it was a mitzvah to eat from the other fruits. Now, why would it be a mitzvah to eat from the other fruits? What kind of mitzvah is it to eat a fruit? Why is it a commandment? Why was that a commandment? Well, we know the Gemara in Bracha says on the pasuk in Yechezkel, Zeh hashulchan asher lefnei Hashem. This is the table that is before God. Shulchanoi shaladam mechaper alav. The table of a person atones for a person. Why does a person's table atone for a person? The Gemara in Tainus says anyone who fasts is a sinner. It says kol hayoshev b'tainus nikra chayte. Anyone who has a sinner, like the Parsha says, bekirbecha kadosh. Your insides are holy. Don't deprive your insides. Well, says the Hafla, what does this mean? It means the following. There's a very important idea, and that is, why do we eat? We eat because we're hungry. But there is an accomplishment. You're achieving something when you eat. And what is that? What you achieve is...
But you eat, you should have koyach to be
okay. Yeah, you eat l'shem shamayim, so you have koyach to serve Hashem. But there is a certain mystical accomplishment when you eat, and that is, there are different levels of life forms. And that is, doimim, soimeach, chai, medaber. What does that mean? Doimim is an inanimate object. Soimeach is a vegetable. It grows, it sprouts, it flourishes. Then there's a chai, there's a living creature, things that are alive, animals. And then there's a medaber, is a speaking creature. These are the four main classifications of life. When a plant grows, it's actually elevating something. It's elevating soil, it's elevating water, and it's elevating sunlight, which are all inanimate. It's elevating it to a higher class, which is a plant. When an animal eats a plant, even though maybe the media is going to be up in arms that chas v'shalom, this type of plant might become endangered and extinct, actually the plants are very happy to be eaten. If you could hear the plants talking, the plant is saying, "Eat me, eat me, eat me. I don't want to be stuck as a tomato for the rest of my life. You got to move up in this world. If you cow, you eat me, then I'm going to be transformed from a plant, from a tzaimeach, to a chai. I will be elevated." And the same way a plant is elevated when you eat it, so too an animal is elevated when you eat it. When you have the cholent on the plate, the flanken is saying, "Do me a favor, I don't want to end up in the garbage and remain a flanken for the rest of my life." No, if I end up in the garbage, you know what's going to happen? They're going to put me in Staten Island, and I'm going to decompose, and then, and they're going to bury me, and I'm going to turn back into a daimim. I want to be a medaber.
Don't dump there anymore. Close.
You moved here, you don't have, it's okay.
But how about those animals that eat those animals? Like the tigers, why are they eating
I don't know, maybe even within the categories it's good, it's elevated. It's better to be a tiger than it is to be a chveis, a zebra, I don't know, I can't tell you. But, better to be orange than black and white. But, in general, when one thing is consumed by the higher order consumes it, digests it, recomposes it, and elevates it to the higher status. Therefore, really, in an ideal world, plants would talk and they would say to animals, "Please eat me already! I cannot remain a cucumber for the rest of my life." And animals would be knocking on our door. A cow would knock on the door. Who's there? It's Elsie. What do you want? I want to be on your table, the Shabbos. And the cows would line up, and they would have like these contests. They would try to show up which is a better cow, which would make better flanken for the cholent. The problem is, though, when you sin, now the cow says, not only am I not knocking on your door, I'm running away from you. I don't want to be on your table because you're not elevating me. I'm not interested in you. By you eating me, I'd rather remain a cow than be part of your stomach. You're not any better than I am. The cow. So that's the meaning of the Gemara, says the Hafla. Really, if birds don't have a problem with parnasa, you know why birds don't have a problem with parnasa? Because the grass wants the birds to eat it, and the grass wants the cows to eat it. That's why animals have no problem with parnasa. Because animals are greater than plants, and therefore plants try as much as possible to get eaten by animals. It's their ambition in life. When the father grass says to the baby grass, one day you're going to grow up and you're going to be zoicha, I'll be real proud of you, you're going to become a cow. Well, me and mommy will be very proud of you one day when you become a cow. It's a big nachas. It's a big thing. They say, what kind of kids do you have? One kid's a horse, one kid's a cow. It's a big nachas to the grass to turn into an animal. But the animals, they go into have these secret meetings and they say, look, man is not like the way it used to be. You got to stay an animal. Better to be an animal than an animal on the streets of the city. Those behemoths are worse. Better to remain a real behemoth, not a crazy behemoth. So therefore, says the Hafla, this is the meaning of the Gemara in Kedushin. You never saw a deer as a hunter. You never see a lion being have a profession. And they have no problem making a living. Why? Because what they need to eat runs to them. But because of our actions, our food, our parnasa runs away from us. So what do we see from here? We see a very important thing. That if a person is elevated, then his parnasa runs to him. If a person is not elevated, his parnasa runs away from him. And it's all because it is the desire of everything in this world to reach a higher strata. In fact, this is the Gemara, the meaning of the Gemara Pesachim Adaf Mem Tes on the base. Look at number 7. Tanya, Rabbi Omer, Am haaretz asur lechol basar. And Am haaretz is not allowed to eat meat. If you're an Am haaretz, you're not allowed to eat meat. Shenemar zois tayras habehema v'ha'oif kol ha'oisek b'tayra muter lechol basar behema v'oif. Anyone who learns Torah, he could eat meat. V'chol she'enoi oisek b'Torah asur lechol basar behema v'oif. So it's very important that there's a vegetarian movement. They're just declaring exactly what they are. They're mamish following the halacha. Am haaretz is not allowed to eat. Yeah. Why is that? Why is an am haaretz not allowed to eat meat? Says the Arizal. L'chein omer Chazal. Am haaretz asur lechol basar. Amnam hatamid chacham yesh behem koyach l'sakin. The tamid chacham that eats the cow is having an aliyah. So the Talmid Chacham is doing the cow a big favor. The cows, when they're in the pen, they're all talking to each other. One day I wish I would be Zoicha to be in the cholent of a Talmid Chacham.
Don't you want to be a carbon better?
No. Says the Hafla, whenever you bring a carbon, it's a kitrug on you. On the person bringing the carbon. Why? It's a kitrug. What's the kitrug? Because you sinned. What would the animal do wrong then? Better eat the animal than kill the animal. Better eat the animal than have to bring a carbon tatas. The animal doesn't have that much of an aliyah when you bring the carbon. Better you eat the animal. That's the real aliyah. Says the Mishnah Avos. Well, yeah.
If that is so, there's a problem. You see that most people who are tzaddikim or Talmidei Chacham, they never have very poor. They barely have meat. They will never put meat. And most yeshivas have no meat except for Shabbos chicken. Yeshivas certainly might better most people. Tzaddikim might still learn Torah. They have no meat on meat. They have chicken on Shabbos. Most yeshivas have to throw. Most Talmidei Chacham have daily cut down. They everything gets always must never even measure it. How is that? There should be that, and whoever all the chayes they eat, it's very less, but all the rest of the food be guys.
We're talking about the way it should be. We're talking about the way it should be.
That's the way it is. That's not the way it should be.
We're talking about the way it should be.
To be an oiler, isn't that a higher madrega than to be a chatlas? Right? Because if
Yeah, but even better is to eat it. Even better is to eat it.
But what about Korban Todah? You don't bring that for a sin, you bring it for a Thanksgiving.
Good. Better not be in danger, and then you could eat it. You're in Thanksgiving because the guy was sick. Better not be sick. Better eat the animal. Better a steak dinner than a carbon in the Beis HaMikdash.
You don't control that.
That's what he says. Look, he says the Hafla says, Iker tikkun hatzaimeach v'achai ba'achilas ha'adam. And then he says,
What number?
He says, Mitzvah lav yisrael lechaper al kitrug ha'karban. Im adam chata behema machata. Yesh tikkun lebehema ba'achilasa yoser me'avalasa lekarban. A carbon is like a downgrader. If a behema, the one cow says, "Other, what did your son be?" Don't tell anyone. He just became a carbon. But I hope my other son will make it to the plate of a Talmud Chacham. That's their ambition. The carbon is not really. The carbon is not Harvard. Harvard is the dinner of the plate of the Talmud Chacham. So there's a Mishnah says in Avos, Reb Shimon Omer, Shloisha sha'achlu al shulchan echad. 3 people that ate on a table. V'lo yamru alav divrei Torah, and they didn't say divrei Torah. Ki'ilu achlu mizivchei mesim. It's like they ate at the sacrifice of the dead. It's like they ate from avodah zarah. Shnemar ki kol shulchanois malu ki tsaya b'li makayim. All these tables are filled of vomit, excrement, b'li makayim, without Hashem. Without Hashem. Why? What is the meaning of 3 people eating at the table? Why dafka 3 people? And what is the meaning of zivchei mesim? So there's a commentary on the Haggadah called Be'er Mayim, and in the commentary Be'er Mayim on Haggadah Shel Pesach, he brings down from the Maggid of Mezrich, who heard from the Baal Shem Tov. You know what it means? 3 people that ate at a table and they didn't say Divrei Torah. It's like eating at the table of the dead, because there's an idea that sometimes a mess, someone who dies, he reincarnates as food. He could come back as your breakfast, he could come back as your lunch, or he could come back as your dinner. Why? Because he needs an aliyah. And if you speak divrei Torah at the table, he has some kind of rectification. So his whole life, he messed up his life. Now he has a last chance. He made it to dinner. You sitting around the table, you think, you're doing a small thing. No, you're doing a big thing. You could save the guy's skin. You're eating a piece of chicken. The guy's in the chicken. He became your chicken. What? The thing is, you got to save his skin. You want to say Dvar Torah. But if you don't say the Dvar Torah, then he's just a mess. It's like eating Zivchei Mesim. Then the guy, you're just eating a dead guy who's in your chicken. So therefore, you could save the guy's skin by speaking Divrei Torah. I know you don't think that way. You think you're just eating supper, and you can have the paper open, and you lean back. No, you could really save somebody's life. So, but you got to make sure you say the Divrei Torah. In the Sefer Yogel Yaakov, on Parshas Miketz, he adds the following. What does it mean, Shloisha sha'achlu al shulchan echad? You know who the 3 are? They're the doimim, they're the tzaimeach, and they're the chai. They're all at your table. In your piece of chicken, the chicken started off as a rock, as earth, as sunlight, as water. It transformed into grass, and transformed into the chicken that the chicken ate. So now on your table you have all 3 categories. And you have an opportunity to raise up all 3 categories to the highest level. What's the highest level? The highest level is Medaber. Who is he? I don't know. He's a parish on Chumash. So he suggests, B'derech Drush, that the Shloisha Sha'achlu Ke'echad is the 3 categories of classification of matter, the doimim, the tzaimeach, and the chai. This is all Rabbi side to acclimate your mind to understanding. People say, it's Rachmanis on the chicken, it's Rachmanis on the animal, it's Sar Balei Chayim, It's all nonsense. They want you to eat it. You're doing it, taka. If you think you're not Amma Oretz, don't eat it. Then you could be a vegetarian. But if you learn Torah, you come to the Shiurim, you're entitled to eat meat. You're doing the chicken a big favor. It's the nicest thing you could do to animals. People say, they stand for animal rights. You say, no, I stand for animal rights. I want to give the animal the right to be elevated. That's animal rights. The real PETA is they don't want to shech the animal. It's achzorius to the animal. It's mamish achzorius to the animal. You know what the animal says every time PETA walks by? You're so cruel to us. We have to remain a chicken for the rest of our life. No, do us a favor. Shecht us. We want to be eaten by a yid. Well, you have to make sure you bring us to the right table. But you're doing the animal a big favor. You're doing your food a big favor. But provided that, Rabbi say, you are eating properly. Now, how do you eat properly? You have to make sure you say Berachas Hamazon. And how many brachas are in Berachas Hamazon? You have 3 brachas in Berachas Hamazon. What are the 3 brachas? One is Hazanas HaKoil, one is Ala Oretz Al Hamazon, and one is Uvnei Yishlayim. The first bracha, it suggests in the Sefer Shvilei Pinchas, the first bracha, Hazanas HaKoil, is talking about how Hashem gives mazon to all living things, to the tzaimeach, to the chai, to the medaber. He's zon es hakol. He feeds everyone. Even he gives it tzaimeach. And then number 2, right? So that represents the category, the classification of doimim, that Hashem feeds everybody. The second bracha is Birchas Haaretz, talking about Eretz Yisrael, the land that produces Chumash and Masros, is to be Mesakein Tzoimeach. And Uvnei Yerushalayim, which is the Makom HaMikdash, the Makom of Karbanos, is the Makom that is Mesakein and brings Tikkun to Balei Chayim. Or you could say it a little differently, that's how he says it. Maybe I would say Hazanas HaKoil is talking about the Tzoimeach, because what's the first bracha? It's thanking Hashem for the food. The food itself is what grows from the ground. The lechem is tzoimeach. The second bracha is the aretz. The aretz itself is the doimim. And then you have Uvnei Yishalayim is the makom to be mala, the category of chai. But be it as it may, what we learn from the Hafla is a very interesting principle. And that is, the Arizal says that every time a category is subsumed by the higher category, it's a tikkun for the lower category. But what the Hafla says is that is why our parnasa is mitigated. It's because the same way, yes, for someone who's a Talmud Chacham, someone on a high level, the food is vying for your attention, for you to be malet, but it works the opposite way as well. That if a person is not on the proper level, then the Panim Yafai says the food is running away from you because it feels it's not a tikkun to be consumed. But that could be...
Why does the Medaber have such problem with Parnasa? The other 2 levels that Kadosh Baruch Hu provides, they don't have an issue.
The problem is because the other 2 levels, an animal is an animal. There are no commandments. The man lowers himself. And a man who does an Avera is worse than a Behema. You see, every category... No, every category... The higher the category, the more when they go wrong, the worse they are. For example, a rock. A rock is a rock is a rock. A good rock, a bad rock. A rock cannot really be that bad. Maybe some mold grows on it, some mildew, not so bad. A plant is beautiful, but a dead plant is worse than a rock. A dead plant is not that pleasant. But worse than a dead plant is a dead animal. An animal is better than a plant, but a bad animal, a disgusting animal, is much worse than a plant. And there's nothing worse than a dead human. As bad as a dead animal is, a dead human is much more. But just like that's in their physical characteristics and the spiritual characteristics as well. And that is when a human being is not acting properly, they're not just, not a human, they're worse than a behema. When a behema is not doing the right, it's worse than a tzaimeach. And therefore it's suggested that through Birchas Hamazon, where a person is really articulating and trying to sanctify the Achila, and that is where the person is ultimately accomplishing the spiritual achievements through their achila, if a person is zahir and berachas hamazon ketikuna besimcha, then that is a skula, that is a medium, that is an avenue for the Rebbe Shalom to likewise provide a person with parnasa besimcha. And this could be part of the explanation for the tradition of the Sefer HaChinuch, that anyone who is careful in berachas hamazon, the Rebbe Shalom will provide them their parnasa, their whole life, b'derech kavod. Rabbi say, Agun Shabbos.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.